we've come to another environment now. This is in the rainforest, a Totara forest. It's quite damp, heaps of moss, everything's wet. So I'm just taking stock of the environment, and I'm looking for some wood that's preferably northerly facing, in a northerly facing clearing so it gets sun all day. That'd be southerly facing if you're northern hemisphere. And somewhere where it's exposed, where it's going to get good wind flow. So I can already see a piece over the river there. It's some 5-finger or some pate that is dead standing. It's vertical and it's in the sun, in the morning sun, and it's next to the river. So that's going to be really dry. That looks dry and not rotten. It's a fine line between finding dry wood and rotten wood. Now if I move over to these Totara trees here, which I believe are a native cedar, there will be a lot of smaller twigs on the bottom end of the branches that we'll be able to snap off as well, and there should be some dry moss under there too. Now our birch that grows in New Zealand, which is kamahi is the native word for it, the Māori word for it, it's not as tarry as the northern hemisphere birch. A northern hemisphere birch, you can basically peel off some of the dead bark and start a fire really easily. We don't have that luxury here in New Zealand. This Totara here does have some dry bark on the outside, but being in a rainforest it's quite damp, so we've got to find somewhere with airflow and somewhere in the sun, which is going to be impossible in this forest because it's bloody moss everywhere and trees, and the sun doesn't really penetrate. But we'll find some dead standing stuff, just little twigs on the ends of trees. And remember, you want to get 10 times more kindling than you think you're going to need, because sometimes it takes a while to dry the wet wood out, and it's such a common mistake. You get the fire going, she just starts to come away, then you run out of small wood and she goes out. Flax flower heads are awesome, such a good source of tinder. You can scrape them up, slice them thinly. One flax stalk's enough to get your fire going. What a score! I'm going to take this, make life easier in case the other stuff doesn't work. This is going to be a really dry bit of flax because it's sitting over the waterway next to the river and gets plenty of airflow, even though it's in the rainforest. It's been foggy all morning, it's a bit damp, but inside it will be dry. Some of this moss too will be dry mid-afternoon if it's in the sun all day, so take note of that if you are in the woods and you know you're going to have to light a fire that evening. Mid-afternoon when it's hot and dry, gather all your kindling then, that's the best time to get it. And you can put it inside your jacket too. Pick some of that moss and some small twigs and put it inside your clothing to dry it out for an hour or so. Now I've got all my wood together, I'm going to build a little platform with the dry wood on the bottom, just to keep that moisture in the ground from coming up and killing my fire as soon as it gets started. I'm just going to rip all my dry stuff off. If it's raining, what you can do is you can get the dry bits of kindling and you can put them inside your jacket, or if you've got a billy or a pot, you can pitch your tent and you can light the fire inside your billy, inside the tent, and then move it outside if it's hammering down with rain and you just can't get it going. If you don't have a lighter and some rubber or fire lighters, you could be in for quite a struggle to get the fire going. So it's better to come prepared and have a good lighter and a backup lighter or some backup matches. I carry one of these little lighters here, which is a windproof lighter, and I also have a backup lighter and some matches in a film canister or waterproof container, just in case. Because if you get hypothermia and you can't light a fire and you then have dry clothes in the tent, you're going to die. Preparation is always better than cure, I reckon. Right, I'll build this platform, I'll keep humming away until I get a real good platform nice and high, and then I'll pull the dry stuff out of my pocket, cut some flax up for some nice tinder, and then we'll have a roaring fire going in no time. If it's really been hammering down, you might have to cut that wet outer layer of the wood off to expose the dry inner wood. And a really easy way to do that is just to make feather sticks, and pretty easy to do those. You just cut around the wood and then keep turning the wood and cutting, turning the wood and cutting and you'll end up with a whole bunch of fine pieces like so, and you can snap that off and poke that in your fire, or you can gather all the dry bits off the ground and use those. Another method you can use is just chop the wood up into kindling. There's a technique that I use, I'll show you fellas that. I hold the knife quite loosely but firmly, if that makes sense, loosely but firmly, so it doesn't go flying out, just enough to keep it in my grip, and then I'll swing it so I can get a chopping action but the knife stops. I'll use this with a tomahawk as well, so I can actually get a good chop but the knife's going to stop, and even if I miss that wood it won't hit my fingers, so it's a good technique to learn. Always keep your knives sharp as. I like to stone my knives with a water stone. This is a Samuel Harrison custom Bowie knife. She's a humdinger. Something to bear in mind when you fellas are getting your fire going is you want a heap of airflow in there, so don't make it too tight, too condensed. The more airflow you get, the better. And that's another real good reason for lighting these upside down fires, is there's so much space on the bottom. If you stack your logs an inch or so apart, or your sticks an inch or so apart, there's going to be plenty of airflow. Once that fire grabs a hold, it's going to start sucking that air up the bottom. It's almost like one of those Indian fires, a hole in the ground, or a smokeless fire. You can dig 2 holes and join them with a tunnel and light your fire over one of the holes, and as it starts drawing, it sucks air through the other hole and through the tunnel and forces air up through the fire as soon as you get a bit of heat, and that'll create a smokeless fire and also help the fire to draw a lot better. But you've got to find dirt that you can dig a hole in and join the tunnels. It's quite satisfying once you get it going, but there's a bit of fluffing around to get it there. I just spent all that time making my fire pile nice and beautiful and even and lots of airflow, and then I got another piece of wood and kicked this bit of wood that was underneath it and then knocked it all over. It's a good idea too to have a backup stash of dry wood, smaller bits next to your fire, so that when you do start it you can feed little bits in and little bits in and just give it a bit of encouragement till it's away. Because if you chuck all your kindling on your fire and don't have a backup stash and she starts to go out, then it burns all your fine bits and you have to start again. Better to do it once, do it right, and put a bit of time into it, I reckon. This is a wetter we just found. It's a prehistoric insect, that one. Looks like he's playing dead. Oh, he's alive there. Whoa, here he goes. We're ready to go now. I'm just going to cut some flax stalk up for the final touch right on the top, and we'll use that to get the initial fire going. This flax stalk's super easy to cut. It's really soft and it's always dry on the inside if it's vertical standing. It's really, really good tinder, and you can actually scrape it with the knife and make a powder or very fine shavings. And if you've got a steel or ferrodium rod, flint and steel, you can use the sparks off the flint and steel to get the fire going with the powdered up flax stalk. It's really good for starting fires. This stuff doesn't burn very long though, she burns really quick, so make sure you got a good stash of it. Let's see if this moss is dry enough to fire up, eh? So as you can see, this moss isn't quite dry enough to start burning. It's still a bit damp. So I've discovered I haven't cut that flax fine enough. I'm not going to give up, I'm just going to shave a little bit more flax off. So I've got some really fine bits of flax stalk, not the leaves, because these leaves are still quite damp because it's so wet here and it's been misty all night. So I'm just going to spend a bit more time shaving some really fine bits of flax stalk off, and then I'll try to light that again. That's why it's really important to have a good lighter, and preferably some fire starters, which I don't have. I'm just using the flax, but we'll get it going. You can see the importance of having a little stash of dry stuff right next to you as you're trying to get it going. It's really hard to get fire going in this rainforest. It's not going yet. We're not out of the woods. But I reckon we'll get there. Everything is so wet in here, it's crazy. As you fellas can see, I'm still tending to this fire. When we had a controlled environment with dry wood, dry kindling, dry big bits, everything was dry, we could just light the fire and leave. But because this wood is also wet, I'm still cutting little bits of fine kindling and adding it to the top and tending it and blowing on it. And it's still not roaring, it could still go out. As you can see, I had a pretty good pile of dead wood to get this thing going, and I've almost used all of my dead wood and it's still not roaring. But we've got fire now, it's pretty stable. So as you can see, because I built that upside down fire, it's slowly burning its way down into the pile now, and as it burns its way down and those coals drop into the stack, it's going to dry that wood off that's in the bottom fully. So I could go away and leave this fire now for about 10 minutes, 15 minutes, come back and it would still be going. I'd go get some bigger bits, get it roaring, but we're not going to do that. We'll just let it burn out and put it out, and we'll try find a mountain environment to light a fire in. I've been fortunate enough to travel all over the world to many different countries, northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere, on the equator, northeast, south, west, and light fires in many of these different environments. The New Zealand rainforest has got to be the hardest environment in the world to get a fire going that I've experienced so far. It's pretty challenging. The only other place that comes close would be the Pacific Northwest, and the jungles down in South Central America can be pretty challenging if it's been raining for a week.
What? Oh.
So here we are, Alpine environment. I'm not going to show you fellas how to light a fire in the Alpine environment. I'm just going to show you this particular plant. This here is turpentine. It's a pretty recognizable plant. That's where you need to light fire in the New Zealand mountains. Get some turpentine. There's always going to be dry wood on the turpentine bush, and it actually burns wet too, or burns green once you get the fire going. You can hack big green logs up, biff them on, and they'll burn. And you can see how well this turpentine burns right there. It is an amazing plant, it really is. Here are good dogs.